Tighten up my meat.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds.
I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation.
But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated.
One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, welcome to the show, guys and gals. We got a great one for you guys on this Thursday afternoon. Fun stuff, not so fun stuff. We'll start out with the disaster that is climate change and move on to lighter topics such as the possible dissolution of the NRA. Fun times. In case you're wondering, what the tight meat is there, Mr. Godzilla?
Tighten up my meat. I like my meat tight.
It was from some weird segment about sandwiches from Fox and Friends. Awesome. It's hilarious.
Tighten up my meat.
He likes his meat tight. Hey, nothing wrong with that. All right, anyway. So, like I said, we got a good show today. We're going to talk about how disastrous the first day of reopening school was in Georgia and why we should not reopen the schools yet. We've got a conservative that says, oh, the hell with it. Let's sacrifice senior citizens to vote for Trump. Oh, my God. So here we go. So that is some of what we're going to talk about. So why don't we just kind of dive into it here, and we will start out with how we are all basically screwed. Great way to start. All right. The world continues to battle the coronavirus. It's especially bad here in the United States, as well as, of course, in Brazil, India, Africa. Other nations are having a difficult time. And I know Africa is a continent, but nations in Africa are also having a difficult time, some of them anyway, fighting this virus. And so now, as we continue to do that, I'm reminded about how this kind of is a dry run for what's going to happen during climate change. And so I recently came across a study that backed that up. So this study warns that if we continue to do nothing when it comes to climate change, we don't do things like very bold ideas like the Green New Deal, for example. We just, basically do business as usual or do very, very little change. The global death rate, and that's what this is saying, from climate crisis could equal or even exceed the current mortality levels from not just one, but all infectious diseases combined by 2100. Now, the study is titled Vaulting. Interesting slip there. Valuing the global mortality consequences of climate change, accounting for adaptation costs and benefits. So that's the study, right? And so it was recently published in the National Bureau of Economic Research. And according to the Climate Impact Lab, which produced a report, the study found out that in a world with continued high fossil fuel emissions, warmer temperatures will rank among the world's most significant public health threats by the end of the century. Now, the Climate Lab explains, quote, the study projects that climate change's effect on temperatures could raise global mortality rates by 73 deaths per 100,000 people in 2100 under a continued high emission scenario. Hey, do you know what scenario, what we're operating under right now? High emissions. Yeah. And so now they compare it to a world with no warming, right? And so the level of death, 73 per 100,000 people, is roughly equal to the current death rate for all infectious diseases, including tuberculosis, HIV, AIDS, malaria, dengue, yellow fever, and diseases transmitted by ticks, mosquitoes, and parasites combined, which is approximately 74 deaths per 100,000 globally. So, okay, well, wait a minute. So how exactly is climate change going to be more dangerous in the long run, right, than all current infectious diseases? Well, okay, so let's look at an example, right? Syria. Wait, Syria? What does Syria have to do with any of this? Well, okay, so I remember back when Bernie Sanders was talking about the Syrian civil war as a partly of a product of the results of climate change, okay? Partly a product of climate change and the effects thereof. And so he got laughed at by the establishment, he got laughed at by the right wing. And it turns out, whoops, you had some pretty bad climate conditions that exacerbated the political situation, the already unstable political situation in Syria. And so, yeah, that led to even more political instability, of course, in the nations that the refugees from that crisis, from that civil war, actually went to. And so that war, again, also took a toll on a lot of people, millions of people. So now imagine all of the Middle East, right, going through something similar, a massive, massive drought as a result of climate change. And then not able to grow food, so you got food shortages in the area. And so we're talking tens of millions, hundreds of millions, possibly of refugees. Where are they going to all go? Who's going to let them in? What if they start fighting each other for the right to get into certain countries? That's just one of the impacts, right? It all kind of cascades. When they talk about the snowball, I mean, the snowball effect, because you ain't going to have no snowballs with, massive climate change, or at least not as many. Hyperbole, guys. It's going to be bad. Okay, all of those effects rolled into each other are going to, one thing spirals off the next, and then the next, and that creates another problem, wars, instability, water, fighting over water, fighting over supplies, fighting over food. You're just going to have a massive amount of death, okay? And as co-author Amir Jina, who is an assistant professor at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy, said, quote, it's plausible we could have the worst case scenario, and that would involve drastic measures such as lots of people migrating, mass migration, much like when COVID overwhelms the healthcare system. It's hard to tell what will happen when climate change will put systems under pressure like that. Yeah. Also consider, again, wars over water, resource wars, famine, that kind of disease, okay, adding into that. And also the effects of more extreme weather themselves, stronger storms, more floods, hurricanes, crisis level stuff, okay? And of course, as always, the poor suffer the most, poorer countries especially, and so that leads to even more death. Report co-author Michael Greenstone, a University of Chicago economics professor, also said this. He says, our data indicate that with the continued growth of greenhouse gas emissions, the temperature effects of climate change are projected to be about 5 times deadlier than recent U.S. flu seasons. In poor countries especially, the heat may be even more threatening than cancer and heart disease are today. Another factor, ironically, is more diseases, right? So look, as permafrost melts, you've got bacteria, viruses that were frozen in the ice. They get released, many of which we don't have an immunity to. So, like, kind of like coronavirus, which is already devastating, it could actually end up being worse than coronavirus. And we don't have an immunity to it, which again means more death. But if somehow you are completely unconcerned about the human cost, oh man, yeah, like, hey, that sucks, right? But what about the economy, bro? Well, I got bad news for you. You're a sociopath, and the economy is going to be devastated as well. Now, the study also found the economic cost of addressing the climate crisis will only increase if little or nothing is done to reduce emissions. So, look, it's already going to be a decent investment, right? A large investment for any nation. It's not impossible. It's not something that we can't afford to do, because in reality, we actually can't afford not to do it. So it has to be done regardless. But we actually have the first world. We have the resources to be able to do so. Maybe instead of, bombing brown people in the Middle East all day, we could take some of that money and use it to install solar panels instead, right? All across the country, and make our buildings a bit greener, not literally, but as far as, more energy conscious, and really gear ourselves to switch off of fossil fuels basically as soon as possible. Okay. It will take a significant investment, but we can do it. And that also means jobs, right? So now let me break down the costs here from that study. Emitting 1 additional ton of CO2 today costs ourselves and future generations a total of $36.6 under a continued high emission scenario, and $17.1 under a moderate emission scenario. So that's just per ton of CO2, right? That's what it costs us in the world. Do you know how much we emit in America in a year? 5.1 billion tons. That was 2017 alone. And since then, of course, the Trump administration has managed to eliminate regulations on coal plants and other, fossil fuel sources of energy, right? And so we could be emitting even more. Well, to be fair, under coronavirus, since we got coronavirus, actually helped to buy us some time, since we're not emitting as much pollution because our economy has come to a little bit of a stop. So now that said, we've got natural sinks to offset carbon, right? And so unfortunately, when it comes to that, our sinks have been filling up, okay? Basically, the ocean is one of the largest places where the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere actually goes. It's absorbed into the ocean. Now, ocean is pretty vast, right? So you think, well, it can hold a lot of carbon. We're actually getting pretty close to getting to a point of where we put too much carbon into the ocean. I mean, for example, we've got now ocean acidification. We've got mass coral bleaching as a result of that. We have species of mollusk, or certain species, that can no longer develop hard shells. We've got the destabilization of ocean life, which will impact fisheries, of course, which are already being overfished at this point. There's also dead spots literally in the ocean where there is no oxygen. Yes, marine life also needs oxygen to survive. And this is, since carbon dioxide is basically replacing this oxygen, not good. Not good at all. And so going back to the economic point, you have the fishing industry that collapses because there's no more fish, or there are limited quantities of fish now. Well, that's going to affect a lot of coastline economies, communities, global food supply, shipping supplies. Basically, everything is connected, okay? And if we destabilize one part of the world, the rest of it feels it. So it's going to be a disaster. Now, the thing is, and this is what we don't get, this is why we're not doing anything about it other than, of course, greed, is that it's a slow problem, right? So that's both a benefit and a problem, right? Because the benefit is, well, since it is happening more, slowly, we can do something about it now and mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. Unfortunately, we as a species tend to ignore the problems until the last minute. And this is not something that you can solve at the last minute because carbon is cumulative. And right now, we're only beginning to experience the impact of carbon we put into the atmosphere a long time ago. The stuff that we're doing now will come due with our children and grandchildren become of age. And so that led, of course, University of California public policy professor Solomon Sang, one of the report's co-authors, to say, quote, we're now studying the risk of death faced by our own children. Today's 10-year-old fifth grader will turn 65 in 2075, facing mortality risks from climate change every year of their retirement, if they're lucky enough to have one. And failing to address climate change is not that different from driving your kids around without a seatbelt. You are putting their lives at risk. Gina added that if we let it get it bad enough through inaction, people will need to choose between paying a high cost to adapt or death. So literal adapt or die. Great. Fantastic. That said, it's not hopeless. Okay. Trevor Hauser, a partner and analyst at firm Rhodium Group, another report co-author, said this: the world can still change course by aggressively reducing emissions, and in doing so, has the potential to deliver some of the most significant public health gains in human history. And so, look, obviously with Donald Trump, we're not going to have that. And with Joe Biden, we're certainly not going to have enough aggressive action. But at this point, we don't have much of a choice. Okay. It's either we continue to slide backwards on the climate, or we at least go back to where we were 4 years ago. Right. And maybe a little bit further. Biden's climate plan isn't quite as bad. It's not as good as Bernie Sanders' plan, of course, or as the progressive plan. It's not the Green New Deal, but it is something a little bit better. So that's something to keep in mind as the election draws near, because, we have to do something because we cannot afford to do nothing. All right. Moving on here. Here we go. There's a brand new ad out there from Minus Touch that goes after let's try that again, okay? I can't talk today, which sucks because I run a talk show. Okay, let's try that again. So there's a new ad out there from Midas Touch that goes after Trump and his family for scamming his donors. Take a look.
Trump donors. Times are tough. After destroying the economy,
The U.S. economy contracted a record-shattering 32.9% last quarter.
causing massive death,
More than 150,000 people have died of the coronavirus in the U.S.
Trump is begging you for money. And begging, and begging. For money to support Don Jr.'s girlfriend and Eric's wife. His hotels. Ferraris for his campaign managers. Golden toilets for Jared and Ivanka. He defrauded a cancer charity. He bankrupted casinos, his companies, a fake university, our country. Don't be Don's next con.
All right, so look, another new ad. Love it. It's pretty good. To be fair, we don't know if Jared and Ivanka actually do have a golden toilet or not. But toilets aside, I think this ad points out his corruption pretty clearly in a very obviously easy to digest manner. And so that is good messaging. I love it. So let me give you a little bit more context into the charity scams in case you're wondering, right? So last year, President Trump had to pay $2 million to 8 different charities as part of a settlement in which Trump admitted that he misused funds raised by the Donald J. Trump Foundation to promote his presidential bid and to pay off business debts. And by the way, Trumps are no longer allowed to be near a charity ever again as a result, at least in New York. So now who did he rip off? Well, according to the New York Times, this is an amazing list. Trump paid that restitution to the Army Emergency Relief Fund, the Children's Aid Society, so ripping off the kids, City Meals on Wheels, wow, Give an Hour, Martha's Table, the United Negro College Fund, the United Way of National Capital Area, and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Dude scammed Meals on Wheels and a Holocaust museum. Scumbag of epic proportions. Holy crap. And by the way, he admitted in court, when this went to court, that he had used $10,000 of donor money to buy a picture of himself. That's what Donald Trump does with donor money. Now, look, if you're talking about really, wealthy donors, that ended up getting like a giant return on investment from his campaign when he lowered taxes for the rich. I don't care if he scams you, right? And actually, you did get a pretty good return on investment. But I'm talking about like the regular donor, the person who is, living in a trailer, they're working a job, not even living in a trailer, but they're just working at a normal job, right? And they're like, oh man, I like that. I like what Donald Trump's saying. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna go give him $10. Don't do that. He's literally scamming you out of your money. You got nothing. I mean, who the hell is dumb enough to give Donald Trump money in the first place? I mean, even to loan him money, like the banks, other than Deutsche Bank, no one else would loan him money because, as that ad pointed out, he's went bankrupt 6 times running casinos. Okay, he's a terrible businessman. Awful. If you give him money, you are going to be scammed. He is a huckster. He's a charlatan. He's terrible at business. That said, right, if you do give to his campaign and you know all this stuff, and you're like, oh, well, I just think that's fake news. Well, then I guess I don't feel bad for you. And those people exist, and they don't care about the facts. I think they just like the fact that Donald Trump says he hates the people that they hate. They want to own the libs. I mean, that's what it's about. Okay, and that's the thing about conservative ideology. It's purely reactionary. They're not advocating for solutions. They're fighting against them. And so they want to bring it back to a time. That's what Make America Great Again is. Bring it back to a mythical time that didn't actually exist, but when white people were on top, essentially, right? And so, yeah, a lot of people are going to give money to this guy so he can keep owning the libs, right? And so I always thought that was a really funny concept, right? So they think that, oh, if I hold up a Trump 2020 sign, if I yell Trump 2020 or write that in the comments, oh man, oh that's gonna really trigger the libs. No, it just makes me feel bad for you because you're obviously not a good person or a smart person, and so it's a little bit pathetic. And I mean that's all I have to say about that. But there is hope. Trump's losing a lot of people due to coronavirus. And I don't mean just because they're dying, which in some cases they are. That's also true. But he is losing people because they do realize as a result of coronavirus and being able to stay home and to watch the news cycles and to not only see what he's been doing, but also feel what he's been doing. Because, yes, they might be like, well, the fake news media, they lie. But in a lot of cases, all you have to do is just to look at your bank account and then look at what Trump's been saying on the TV and realize there's a little bit of a disconnect here, right? A little bit more of a disconnect. And so you start to realize that, especially when you're not blinded by hatred. And so they realize they've been taken for a ride by a man who doesn't really even know how to drive the car. All right. Let's see, there's that. Moving on. Plans to reopen school in Georgia faced a gigantic setback after children in a second grade class had to go immediately back into quarantine as a result of getting coronavirus. So now local news station WGCL reports that a student at the Sixes Elementary School in Cherokee County was recently diagnosed with COVID-19 just after they attended class on Monday of this week. That was the first day back to school after summer break. So now, as a result, all 20 students in that class, as well as the teacher, are now under quarantine for the next 2 weeks. And of course, instruction for those students will be switched to online only. So in a note sent to parents, Principal Ashley Kennerly had encouraged all parents to be vigilant in monitoring their children for symptoms, potential symptoms of the disease. Students should remain at home if they're exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19, including fever, new or persistent cough, headache, loss of taste or smell, fatigue, and or stomach issues. And of course, that's good advice. Problem is, not every child is going to have symptoms. And still, the thing is, children are vectors of transmission. And if you can not have symptoms, be infected, and still infect other people. That's one of the big problems here. This is how COVID-19 spreads through a community. And yet, this is the president of the United States just yesterday talking about the coronavirus and opening schools.
My view is the schools should open. This thing's going away. It will go away like things go away. And my view is that schools should be open. If you look at children are almost, and I would almost say definitely, but almost immune from this disease. I mean, literally, they are virtually immune from this problem.
So the reason I show you that is that it's kind of important because the fish rots from the head down, right? So President Trump and Republicans at the national level pushed the state parties to reopen, pushing schools to reopen. Betsy DeVos is one of them who wants schools to reopen as quickly as possible. And so this is what happens. And so, look, we know he doesn't live in reality. We know he's dumb. We know he's callous, all that stuff, right? But again, people listen to him. Parents listen to him. The elected officials listen to him. And they do so without taking a gigantic grain of salt with what he says, or a gigantic helping of salt. You should take the whole salt shaker. I mean, if you're unironically quoting something that he has said, and you're actually like, no, you don't understand. The president said it was okay. No, it's not okay. You're putting people in danger. Not a good thing. Luckily, idiocy isn't terminal. You can fix that a lot easier than you can fix COVID-19. These children, I mean, look, this should be a wake-up call, okay? This should be a warning that we are not ready. We are not ready to reopen. You've got to keep everybody home. I know it sucks, but even Dr. Fauci is saying we should be waiting for a vaccine. We're probably not going to be ready to reopen until we are basically, until we have a vaccine, we're not going to be ready to reopen. And that's obviously terrible and crappy in the short term, but this is our reality. I mean, look, conservatives are partly right. We're going to have to learn to live with this. Yes, that virus isn't going away, but where I'm going to disagree with conservatives is that their idea that since we're going to be living with this virus, let's get back to normal as soon as possible and sacrifice old and weak people for the markets. No. We have to lock down. I'm sorry. Until there's a vaccine, an effective proven treatment, and a test that is effective and fast and widely available, and all that stuff being widely available, by the way, which unfortunately, from what I've been reading, a vaccine could cost anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. So really, it's not available and will not be available for the masses amount of people. So absolute disaster. And we're not going to be able to open up until everyone has that. We've got to bring that mortality rate significantly down. And so, and the infection rate, and until we do, sorry, we're not going to be able to open up. All right, I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I'm going to read some super chats if we have any, member comments as well, and thanks to patrons and channel members. So stay right here. Be right back. Around the Nation.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
I like my meat tight. Tighten up my meat.
Wait, oh, you're getting nervous, man.
Around the Nation, back, Waldorf Nation. All right, guys. So I want to first go and thank some patrons. I want to thank Casey Andrade and Martha Dillard. I also want to thank the members at our channel members, and you can join by hitting the join button below. DLB and CMT63 become a patron by going to patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. All right. So one of you asked earlier, hey, I'm a TYT member and I don't have a badge here. That's because we're not officially, we're not one of the in-house managed TYT channels. We are a network partner, but I manage everything. And so unfortunately, TYT membership does not carry over, whether on YouTube or otherwise. That's why we have our own membership options. So check those out. And if you like the show, sign up. All right. So let's get into, let's see, a super chat here from, it's not showing up, but not showing up where it's supposed to anyway. But Adrian Benningfield says, yeah, sacrifice Golden Week till flu season and COVID mutates, killing more people. Well, I mean, with the high rate of infection, I mean, yeah, it could mutate to be more deadly, or it could mutate to be like completely benign. Who knows, right? Is what's going to happen. And I'm certainly not a scientist. That'd be great, though, if I could, or if it could, just mutate to something completely harmless and just disappear. I actually wish Donald Trump were right about that the virus will just disappear. Unfortunately, I don't think that's how that works. And when you're the resident of the United States, you might want to be like, hey, we would like it for it to disappear, but I don't know if we're going to. So we might want to buckle down and do the hard work of trying to combat this virus and save as many American lives as we can. All right. Additional reason to wear masks. Foils facial recognition technology. That's a great reason. I'll take it. It is now fashionable to wear masks to screw that up. So that's awesome. I'll take it. All right, let's get to more stories here. Oops. Conservative radio host John Bernstein has a message for seniors. Risk your life to vote for Trump.
If these seniors can put a mask on or not, doesn't matter to me, and go to their grocery store or their bank and wait in line to do their business, then they can get up, get out of the house, and go down to the polling stations and vote in person. We need to make sure these seniors are voting in person.
All right, so he's very adamant about voting in person. Why is that? Well, we'll get to that. But first, I got a couple problems with some of his analogies, right? Hey, man, if you can go to the grocery store and you can go to the bank, then of course you can go and vote, right? Okay, well, what is it? Why would you go to the grocery store? Well, you go there to get food, right? You kind of need food to survive, right? Banks. Well, I mean, you might think, well, do you need a bank to survive? Well, banks store money. You need money to pay your bills. Paying your bills, make sure that you have a home, that you have electricity, and that for example, that electricity. I can't believe I have to break this down for this guy. So that electricity powers something called a refrigerator where you store food. Food you need to survive. And so, yeah, it's kind of important to be able to go to the bank and also go to the grocery store. That said, we live in an age, a miraculous age, where we don't actually have to go to those places in person anymore, right? I mean, for example, you can order groceries online. So now, look, that still involves a person physically going and doing the shopping and then either dropping it off or having you come and pick it up in your car. And there's a certain amount of risk to the essential employee that usually has to do that. And that's fair to point out. It's not entirely a riskless endeavor. And we know that. That's why we wear masks, to go and mitigate that risk. And so understand, though, that there are ways around that. That there are ways, where if somebody who is a senior citizen or who has a condition, a pre-existing condition like diabetes, I get so used to saying it like that. Diabetes, or, hypertension, anything, heart problems, liver problems, kidney problems, whatever, right? you have a condition that makes you more susceptible to COVID-19, you at least have that option if you have the money to do so, if you're lucky enough to have that money to be able to order groceries to have them delivered, right? Okay, sure. And so not only that, but banking technology has really increased by a lot. I mean, you can go and do things online. You can bank online and not even have to step foot into a bank. I know it's crazy what you can do, right? And so voting is kind of the same way, right? Now, online voting, not a good idea, right? Why is that, Jeff? Because it's not exactly accountable. The results can be messed with a little bit too much. And so there are definite electoral or voter fraud situations when it comes to purely online voting. But you know where there aren't those problems, right? Absentee ballots and mail-in voting, which again allows you to not have to leave your house in order to cast your ballot, which is great for people who have compromised immune systems, who are older, who are more at risk. So now that said, right, Bernstein, the reason that he's pushing in person is because he thinks that all these different ways to vote that are not only more convenient, but actually also really safe and secure are not. They're rife with voter fraud, he says. Well, that's not true. It's not. Studies have actually shown that all forms of voting fraud are actually incredibly rare in the United States. For example, a national study back in 2016 found very few credible allegations of fraudulent voting. And even a panel that Trump charged with investigating election corruption found no evidence of voter fraud. Remember Donald Trump's voter fraud commission, right? He's like, oh, we're gonna make this commission, right? And it's gonna find all the voter fraud, and it's gonna put a stop to it. Well, that commission ran, and they investigated, and what did they found? Diddly squat. They didn't find nothing. No evidence of widespread voter fraud. And if Donald Trump's team can't find it, right, the team that he put together to go and find voter fraud that would help him make his case and help Republicans make their case that we should have not only voter ID but all vote in person, right, and not have these mail-in ballots, which, by the way, have not been an issue until coronavirus, ironically, right? Republicans had not been railing against absentee voting and mail-in voting until it became an acceptable part of the conversation because of coronavirus. They didn't have a problem with that, right? But they did have a problem with voter ID, and so they were trying to make that argument to push that. And so, yeah, they couldn't find it, though. They couldn't find any evidence of it because it doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. Charles Stewart III of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, who, by the way, studies election and voter fraud, so he'd be kind of an expert on this. He says this: voting fraud in the United States is less rare is fraud using mail-in ballots. All right, well, there he goes. Mr. Stewart also pointed to several documented voting fraud cases in recent decades, because there's a handful of them, that involved mail or absentee ballots. Most recently, the race in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District back in 2018, when an operative who rounded up absentee ballots for the Republican candidate, Mark Harris, was charged with election fraud. The practice is known as ballot harvesting. So, okay. Now, on that, Mr. Stewart says, quote, their stories, they're dramatic, they are rare. All right. Well, there you go. And interestingly enough, all these attempts at voter fraud tend to get caught because, let's be honest, if you want to cheat your way into office, you're going to have to change a lot of votes. We're talking thousands, tens of thousands of votes, at least in national elections. Local elections, the margins can be much, much thinner. But something like that, a situation like that, where it is a razor-thin margin, well, that makes people a lot more wary. And so they look out for voter or electoral fraud even more in those situations. So if you had these weird spikes, people are going to notice. So that's really hard to pull off in those kinds of races. And then the only entities, of course, capable of doing something like that are happen to be political campaigns. And the opposition, again, is going to be watching for that. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to try. With such a high likelihood of getting caught, why risk it? So now Richard L. Hassan, another elections expert at the University of California, Irvine School of Law, also agrees that voter fraud, especially through mail and absentee ballots, are few and far between. Quote, election fraud in the United States is very rare, but the most common type of such fraud does involve absentee ballots. And he says that sensible rules for handling of absentee ballots make sense, not only to minimize the risk of ballot tampering, but to ensure that voters cast valid ballots, as well as, of course, most important thing, having your vote counted. And so understand that we're okay with that. We're okay with common sense measures to make sure that, yes, that your vote is counted, especially if it's an absentee ballot. And there are a lot of issues right now with absentee ballots getting rejected too much. And we've seen that in Democratic primaries especially. And so, yeah, the system is not 100% perfect, and no system is. And we can definitely improve it. But fairly, for the most part, it works. It works, and it's secure. So, that said, I'm thinking that, the rhetoric against absentee ballots and vote by mail is not about voter fraud. Okay? Republicans are actually pretty open about their own reasons to oppose absentee ballots. In fact, President Trump tweeted this. He said, mail-in voting, for whatever reason, doesn't work out well for Republicans. He's basically just saying, for some reason, mail-in ballots, it still work for us, for Republicans. Sort of a way of saying, because I think that, it brings out, like, Democrats. It brings out more voters. And that's what that's about. In fact, Georgia, where the Secretary of State is mailing all voters absentee ballot requests for the May primary, the State House Speaker, David Ralston, a Republican, told a local news site that, quote, this will be extremely devastating to Republicans and conservatives in Georgia. This will certainly drive up turnout, not drive down, drive up. So wait, what's wrong with increased turnout? And by the way, I realized that was an older article from before the primary in Georgia, but nonetheless, right? So that's their problem with this. They do not want more people voting. It is the same old song and dance that you can hear from the OG supporter of voter suppression.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Hey, man, that was one of theirs. Explicitly telling you, I don't want more voting because when more people vote, we lose. That holds true today. I mean, and that's, of course, why you have voter suppression. That's why you have gerrymandering. That's why you have all these attempts to stop people from voting. So now, back to Bernstein here, right? So now, Bernstein, hold on, let me get the right video. So now Bernstein, since he's consistently against absentee ballots and early voting, which, again, many conservatives have actually used. I believe Kayleigh McEnany has voted absentee. Donald Trump, of course. Mike Pence. Many more people have been, very, very, have used this, right? Very enthusiastically casting their ballots using the absentee system. Doesn't matter. Bernstein is more than happy to have older people pay the price for his convictions against expanding voting.
Now, many of our Christians have...
All right, hold on. Let me get the right video. For some reason, that was not the right video. Weird. Here we go.
Now, here's the controversial part. Some of these folks may actually get sick, and that's sad, and it's unfortunate, and I hope that it doesn't happen. And some of them, yes, they may even die and pass away. So be it. I don't mean to be callous. I don't mean to be cruel. I don't mean to be insensitive. But we're not asking you to storm the beaches of Normandy here, and we're certainly not asking you to try to overtake, Hamburger Hill either. We're asking you to get out of the house and go down and vote for President Trump so that you can secure your children and your grandchildren's future to make sure that they live in the freedom that you have enjoyed as well. Okay?
Right.
Some people are going to die. So be it.
Well, actually, they don't need to.
I'm with the second guy. They don't need to. Yeah, they really don't. By the way, Hamburger Hill, right? Boy, what a reference, right? Donald Trump probably would rather have you storm Hamburger Hill. Just saying. All right, anyway. So, now, but you heard that, right? Sacrifice your life, to help Donald Trump win the election so that he can give more tax cuts to the rich, basically. I mean, look, let me tell you, neither of the candidates that are running, Democrat or Republican, are really worth throwing your life away. Let me just say that, okay? Not worth it. I mean, are you kidding me, though? Look, I know these guys are like conspiracy theorists. I mean, this guy, this is the first I've done on Mr. Bernstein, right? But just going through some of the titles of his videos, right? Like, oh, Democrats should be sterilized. No, this guy's a nut. He's a complete insane person. But let me tell you what. You know what the real fraud is in our electoral system? The Electoral College. That we don't have an actual direct democracy. And the fact that we're not automatically registered to vote as citizens. That we have to go and register to vote every single time. Insane, right? No, we could do better. And we should be doing better. But we don't, because there are people who literally don't want others to vote. Now, I'm saying, and by the way, when I say that both the candidates are not worth throwing your life over, I'm not saying don't go out and vote. I'm saying that we should have things like, I don't know, mail-in voting. We should expand that. We should expand absentee ballots. It works everywhere it's been done. Oregon, they've had it for quite some time, and it works, and it's secure, and it's effective, and yes, everybody's able to vote. And so it also doesn't require you or anyone else to become exposed to COVID-19. And also, it doesn't make the sacrifice of grandma and grandpa to the markets necessary. And so those are all excellent reasons to support absentee ballots and, mail-in voting. And to forget about this guy. Okay. Moving on here. One more story for you guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got it.
Wait. Maybe. Now, the Attorney General of New York recently took action to dissolve the NRA. The NRA. All right, so now let me give you some details, right? So now New York did an investigation, and they found evidence that the NRA itself happens to be filled with fraud and abuse. So now Attorney General Letitia James, who filed this lawsuit, said that she found financial misconduct in the millions of dollars and that it contributed to a loss of more than $64 million in a 3-year period for the organization. You know, a lot of that comes from members' dues, right? As well as charitable funds from big donors. And so that money, well, they alleged that a lot of that money ended up going right into the pockets of NRA executives. Now, I'm going to show you the press conference here when that Letitia James had earlier today, where she announced this lawsuit. Take a look.
Just a few minutes ago, my office filed a lawsuit against the National Rifle Association to dissolve the organization in its entirety for years of self-dealing and illegal conduct that violate New York's charities law and undermine its own mission. For years, the NRA diverted millions and millions of dollars away from its charitable mission for personal use by senior leadership, to award contracts to the financial gain of close associates and family, and appeared to dole out lucrative no-show contracts to former employees in order to buy their silence and continued loyalty. This lawsuit specifically charges the NRA as a whole, in addition to 4 individual defendants.
All right, so now that's Letitia James. So now I'm going to get into at least one of the defendants here. And, well, I'll give you all their names, actually. And so, as you heard here, James' complaint names the National Rifle Association as a whole, but names 4 current and former NRA executives. So you've got Executive Vice President Wayne LaPierre, who's been named in the suit, General Counsel John Frazier, former Chief Financial Officer Woody Phillips, and former Chief of Staff Joshua Powell. It also lists dozens of examples of alleged financial malfeasance, including the use of NRA money for vacations, private jets, expensive meals. Let's see. There's a lot more. For example, you've got LaPierre himself, who was accused of using charitable funds for personal gain, including a post-employment contract valued at more than $17 million that was not approved by the NRA's board of directors. The lawsuit also claims that LaPierre received more than $1.2 million in expense reimbursements over 4 years, which included gifts for friends, travel expenses, and memberships at golf clubs and hotels. Gee, I wonder if Mar-a-Lago is on there. It also alleges that LaPierre spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on private plane trips, including for extended family when he was not present, traveled to Africa with his wife on a safari gifted by a vendor, and spent more than $3.6 million on luxury black car services and travel consultants in the past 2 years. And also they alleged that people who attempted to blow the whistle on this behavior were retaliated against by LaPierre. So that's just LaPierre. And again, the rest have similar charges of self-dealing. So now, in addition to dissolving the organization in its entirety, the lawsuit also asks the court to order LaPierre and other current and former executives to pay back unlawful profits, and also seeks to prevent the 4 named individuals from ever serving on the board of a charity in New York. That sounds a lot like what happened with Donald Trump. So, wow. Again, a lot of this money, it did come from people who profess to believe in protecting the Second Amendment. And that's why they give the NRA money. And, well, unfortunately for them, the NRA does not represent gun owners. No, and let me give you some examples of it, right? So now, remember Philando Castile. Philando Castile was a man who was shot by the police. He was a legal gun owner. He was not reaching for his weapon. He was in a normal traffic stop. And he said, I have a weapon here. I have a weapon. I'm not going to reach for it. I'm going to give you what you asked for, license and registration, and my information, my personal information. Please don't kill me. Well, he was killed anyway, shot and killed during a routine police stop. Another example of this is Kenneth Walker. Now, Kenneth Walker was a boyfriend of the late Breonna Taylor. Now, Kenneth Walker was a legal gun owner and ended up using his firearm against unmarked plainclothes police officers who barged in to the apartment and murdered his girlfriend, shot her 8 times for no reason after they had the man in custody that they were actually looking for, and there were no drugs in that house. So now those are just 2 examples. Now, what do those examples have in common? Oh, right. They're black people. But wait, I thought the NRA was supposed to go against big government and big government overreach. And well, I mean, you can't get bigger government than the, police just firing indiscriminately into your apartment 20 times. That's pretty big. That's pretty bad, right? That's definitely abuse by a tyrannical government. What happened, NRA? Why did you not back them? Because they don't back legal gun owners. They just don't. The NRA did not come to their defense at all because they only represent one kind of gun owner, white conservatives. When it comes to black leftists who own guns, oh, hell no. They do not represent black gun owners. Look, they don't like the gun rights of any leftist. And in addition, they only serve the gun manufacturers, and what they do is that they push fear on people. Whenever any Democrat gets into office and even mentions any sort of modest measure of gun control, they push that fear, right? And they say, oh, the Democrats are coming for your guns. They're going to take your guns. Big government coming for your guns. When, by the way, the ironic thing here is Donald Trump also said we should probably take people's guns. It took a sit down with LaPierre for Trump to say, right, no, boy. Yeah, I guess we won't take their guns. I love the Second Amendment. Isn't the Second Amendment great? I mean, the money from LaPierre and the NRA is fantastic. But, and by the way, they donated millions of dollars to help Donald Trump get elected. So that's what they do also with a lot of their money is they give to conservative politicians. So now the thing is, once Donald Trump got into office, they didn't have scary black man in office to, try to scare people into, oh my God, black Democrats coming for my guns, right? So sales for the NRA went way down, and the NRA itself ran out of money for that and other reasons. Now, a secret recording of the NRA board meeting obtained by NPR back in April showed LaPierre telling the audience that the NRA's legal troubles have cost the organization around $100 million. He said the cost that we bore was probably $100 million lost revenue and real cost to the association in 2018 and 2019. LaPierre said, according to a recording by a source in the room, and he said, I mean, that's huge. Hey, look, that is a lot of money, right? Now, much of this has to do with their legal troubles, facing congressional inquiries and investigations by multiple state attorneys general, as well as internal whistleblower complaints, some of which LaPierre has been accused of retaliating for. And the NRA's finances have sagged under the burden of legal costs. In the ongoing litigation between the NRA and Ackerman McQueen, its former public relations firm, a brief filed by the firm on April 15th indicates its belief that the NRA has paid its outside legal counsel over $54 million in the past 2 years. So, I mean, they're not doing well. They're not doing well at all. So now here's the thing: if you're a rabid right winger and you're like, Second Amendment, there are other gun rights organizations, right? And those organizations might actually not screw you out of money and may actually care about the Second Amendment. The NRA has never backed you, at least not since the 80s, I believe, early 80s, maybe late 70s, when they realized, oh, it's actually more profitable to be a tool of the gun manufacturers so they can sell more guns. Again, originally, well, maybe not originally, but at some point, the message about the NRA was, hey, look, they just want to teach you gun safety and protect your right to bear arms. And, well, they don't do that anymore. Again, they're all about ginning up fear to try to sell more guns. And that's what this is. And so, not to mention, by the way, putting out crazy things like NRA TV, right? You guys remember that, where they just have crazy after crazy on telling you how your gun rights are under assault, even though we have more gun rights than we've ever had before, and consequently more school shootings than any other country in the modern world. And so it's actually much more dangerous than a lot of other countries that we would call third world with our gun violence. And so, yeah, that was what they brought to the table as well. Now, if they do get dissolved, well, there's a couple of good things from it, right? For one, they're not going to be able to donate millions of dollars to right-wing candidates. Oh, darn. Fiddlesticks, right? That sucks. And goodbye, NRTV, and their ridiculous fear-mongering bullshit, and their ability to help sell guns on behalf of gun manufacturers. That said, are they actually going to get dissolved? That's a good question, right? Again, they had a lot of money. They've got money troubles now. And so I believe their influence has always been exaggerated, right? I mean, they're actually a fairly small organization and hadn't actually given, like, yes, they give money to politicians, but they never really gave tons and tons and tons, as much as, you know, what we would think that their influence really was. So there is a chance that they might not survive this. And if they do, well, it may not last much longer afterwards due to the weight of all the things that are actually against it. And so to that, I say good riddance to an awful, awful organization. Sorry, not sorry. All right. Dana Loesch. Yep. Dana Loesch, Dana Lash, whatever. I forgot her name because she is just really not all that important of a person to me. And she's a horrible person. So at least, hey, if NRA goes over or goes under, no more TV. No more NRA TV. That's good. NRA had a channel. Oh my gosh. Super beta carotene. No, I didn't see the beet drink. Luckily, I didn't. All right. Anyway, so thank you guys for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or go to our channel memberships and join that way. That said, that's all I got for you guys today. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow for another excellent show. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you.
Tighten up my meat.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
I like my meat tight. Tighten up my meat.
Mike Pounds.
Please clap.
Tolerize it.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.